What if the USA is nationalizing Strategy's Bitcoin? They would have, in an instant, almost 1 million Bitcoin. They did do in the past something similar with the Executive Order 6102. In my opinion, this nationalizing of Strategy's Bitcoin is a real possibility in the USA, and that's why I asked today Samuel Kullmann, a politician and an absolute expert when it comes to public policy, what he thinks not only about Strategy's Bitcoin being potentially nationalized, but also what he thinks about the politics in general, where Europe is going, where Switzerland is going, and what impact Bitcoin will have long term on nation states. Enjoy. How have you been in Bitcoin? What have you kind of seen in Bitcoin that is most interesting for you in the last couple of days, weeks, months, years? How long you ever want to go back?
Well, I've sort of been in the Bitcoin space since 2016, very slowly, then since 2021, much more, especially joining the Bitcoin community in 2021. In 2022, I started to go to conferences. And the last 2 years, I think I've been at 7 conferences, being speaker at some of them. So I've been around a while, I would say, especially for a politician. I think I'm probably the first politician, at least in Europe, who's been part of the Bitcoin community. And not just going maybe to a conference to get some votes, but actually being part of the community. So what developments am I seeing the past few days? I think the biggest development for me is MicroStrategy and the new product they have launched with the more than 10% yield a year. I think that's a very interesting product, and which could really revolutionize the financial system. My impression is that Michael Seyr is doing a careful job, very ambitious, very much all in, but within that reasonably well thought through, as far as I can tell. So I think that's a very interesting development. And then on other sides, in 2024 was a big year with nation state Bitcoin adoption. It was quite in the news with the presidential campaign in the United States, with different states pushing for, or legislatures in different US states pushing for pro-Bitcoin bills. So there was a wave of efforts with some states like Texas establishing a Bitcoin reserve, maybe making a small purchase. So there have been some small steps. Right now, I don't think it has the same momentum as 1 or 1.5 years ago, but some steps have been taken, and also in Europe, with the Czech central bank being the first central bank to buy Bitcoin, albeit only a tiny percentage compared to their whole reserves, and the sovereign wealth fund of Luxembourg going into Bitcoin. I think those are notable developments, but they're still few and in smaller or not that big countries yet. So
I want to stick just a little bit on the strategy Michael Seyr side, because there are 2 aspects that I think could be interesting to discuss from a nation state perspective. The first thing is, do you think that Stretch as a product will be adopted by nation state in some sense, in like sovereign wealth funds, in implementing it in some way or sense or form, like maybe not now, but when it's more tested and long in the market?
I'm not an expert on that issue, but I would be surprised if it wouldn't eat itself through the whole system. So if it's out there, and especially if Bitcoin continues to go up in price again, does its number go up thing again, then strategy will be in an excellent position with approaching 1 million Bitcoin. So they'll be in a very, very good position, I believe. And if everything, like if the market does like what Michael Saylor thinks it will do, and that product is as stable as it is planned to be, and there's this opportunity to build trust with the market participants, then I would assume that it becomes a really very, very interesting product out there, which I do not see why nation states should not at some point also look at it, or maybe central banks if they need any form of reserves to hold on the balance sheet. I mean, the Swiss National Bank already owns strategy stocks. They've been owning them for a couple of years already. So why not?
There's one thing that people are speculating in the USA with strategy, especially because they have so many Bitcoin. If they could get nationalized at some point, it's kind of like strategy building out the Bitcoin reserve for the USA right now. I'm not an expert in history, but there are a lot of people that claim there have been done similar things in history, that this could be a potentially interesting case, and you could just give the shareholders a bunch of fiat money to basically pay them off. So is that something that you think is possible in the USA if Bitcoin gets more dominant and strategy just keeps on accumulating and has maybe between 1 and 2 million Bitcoin?
I think the US government has other options. I mean, this would be the nuclear option to confiscate or try to confiscate these Bitcoin. I mean, if strategy continues to hold all of them with Coinbase, that might not be that difficult for the US government, but it would be an extreme violation of property rights. So the US government, or the United States in general, which is known for its huge capital market, which you can only have if you guarantee private ownership. As soon as you start to saw away on that branch of the tree and you're sitting on that branch and you're sawing it in part, then this is extremely dangerous and can have extreme counter effects. Like if you attack private property by the confiscation of such an amount of wealth, it has tremendous side effects, negative side effects. So any US government that would do this would be completely insane, totally lacking economic sense. So I don't think, at least the Republican government, I do not think would go there. I mean, the Democrats are crazy enough to do all different kinds of, I mean, Trump is also crazy, but the Democrats might be more crazy in an economical sense, maybe going more the communist direction almost. So I wouldn't totally rule it out, but I think if the US government realizes they need to hold a large amount of Bitcoin, they could still buy these Bitcoin. I mean, different analysts have said that in the past 12 or 14 months, 9 million Bitcoin have changed ownership. And so seeing that Microsoft strategy has around 800,000 now, BlackRock manages around 800,000 Bitcoin. The US government is still big enough. They can just go into debt and buy Bitcoin if they have to, if they come to the conclusion that they need 1 million Bitcoin. It's not impossible for the US government to acquire that amount through more traditional means, I would say.
It's a good one, yeah, because they can still do it in many different other ways, and it's actually an interesting perspective, because if they if they actually nationalize the strategy, they're sending out a signal to all the entrepreneurs building in the country. If you want to build something here and you get too successful, we will be taking it away from you, which would be a horrible example to make. But I don't know, like it's not. I wouldn't still rule it out, but it's just like would be a horrible example. But nothing in the near future. I think that Bitcoin probably would need to be critical infrastructure at that point. Like it would need to not be a $2 trillion asset, but like a, I don't know, 50 trillion, 100 trillion, $200 trillion asset without the inflation calculated for such a move even to slightly make sense even from socialist parties.
Yes. Yeah, it would be a massive escalation. I mean, totally reckless and desperate move. Yeah. Which is not, I don't see that happening in the next few years.
I want to talk about the future of politics in general, what we can learn from Switzerland, what is going good or going bad in Switzerland also. I want to talk a little bit about Europe because I'm a very optimistic and hopeful person, and sometimes hard in Europe to be that. And then I also want to talk a little bit about American politics. I don't know how deep you're into it, but just like curious how you think about that. For the people that are not aware of Switzerland, because I think it's something very important just to know, what makes Switzerland special that is different to the rest of Europe and different to America?
Switzerland has a very unique political system. It's a combination of three major factors that make it quite unique. One is federalism, which is not totally unique. I mean, the United States has the subnation states, which have a lot of autonomy. They can decide on their own taxes. They have different areas of government where it's in their competency to legislate and to decide on how taxpayers' money is spent. So that is not unique to have the subnation level, the province level of government. However, what is quite unique is how much autonomy the cantons have in Switzerland, and how much taxpayer money is spent on that level. So about 45% of taxpayers' money is spent on the cantonal level, and only 1/3 on the national level, and the rest on the municipal level. So the canton, the province in Switzerland, is quite important politically. So that is one interesting aspect. Another aspect that is also not completely unique in the world, but where Switzerland does it the most is with direct democracy. We've had, in the existence of the modern nation state of Switzerland, we've had almost 700 policy votes, ballot votes, where citizens decided on policy issues directly after the parliament and government had already decided, and the referendum vote by the people is always binding. So whether the people decide to bring down a law which parliament has passed, or whether to amend the constitution to push for something that parliament and government was not doing so far, all those votes are binding. And so the people have a very direct influence on policy issues, not only on the politicians they elect, but also on the policy issues that are the most important ones between election periods. So other countries also have direct democracy. Taiwan, for example, they introduced it a couple of years ago. They've had good experiences with it. But many other countries only have a referendum vote quite seldom, and Switzerland has them very, very regularly, like 4 times a year, maybe 3 to 5 issues per vote date, so up to maybe 20 issues a year. That is a lot. I mean, Switzerland is voting almost as much on direct democratic policy issues than the rest of the world combined, one could say. Then a third aspect of the political system of Switzerland is that we don't have one strong prime minister or one strong president, but we have a team government of 7 ministers that share the power equally. So Switzerland is the only country in the world with a team government. And that is what makes our political system very unique. The other two aspects, federalism and direct democracy, amplify that uniqueness.
How is it actually working? Because in politics, you usually have like a head that you kind of point towards, or like that in important negotiations with other states is kind of the person that goes there. If there's something that Switzerland has to discuss with the EU, or something that Switzerland has to discuss with, I don't know, Donald Trump, is there like one person that always goes there, or is this like some like it's like, how is this decided who goes, or yes, all 7 people always go?
So Switzerland does have a president, but the president is one of the 7 ministers, and they take turns in being the president of Switzerland annually. So, and while during the office of the presidency, that person doesn't have more power than the other 6 within the team government. So the president just has more representative functions. So our president might be the one to go to speak to Donald Trump, for example, about the tariff issues, which was a big deal a couple of months ago. Or it could be our foreign minister, or whoever is suited for that job. So it also depends on the issue at hand. And then that person would speak for the whole government of Switzerland.
Interesting. Now for Europe, how do you currently look at the development in the European Union? So like the European countries like outside of Switzerland and the UK and those that aren't in the European Union. How do you look at those developments, not only at the European Union level, but also on the national level, like Austria, Czech Republic, Germany? Is it still a very negative trend, or do you see some positive things that you can point to that things might be improving?
I think the number of countries that are in a very negative trend, like Germany, Great Britain, also France, that have huge challenges on the one hand with radical Islam, which has been becoming a growing problem with more and more city parts that are where the law of the country does not count anymore, because it was taken over by a group of people with a radical different ideology, also with a totalitarian ideology. So I think that's a very big problem. Then we've had also a lot of very destructive policies in Germany, in other countries, a lot of statism. So many Western European countries are by now more socialist than they are free market economies, because the state quota, like how much of the economy is influenced by the state, has reached more than 50%. So I think in Germany, it's more than 55% of the economy that is, basically influenced by the state. So that is closer to socialism than to a free market economy. And I think it's also a bit similar in France. In Great Britain, we have a very incompetent government, the Labour government, which just did not have a majority in the population, but because of the electoral system, got a huge majority in parliament. They are doing terribly in the polls. Could be that Reform UK will win the next elections, but that might still take a few years. But Great Britain is definitely also on a difficult way. Many countries are not doing well. And I think there's really a lack of I think there's just too much statism and too much woke ideology too much leftist ideology, too much regulation, too much destruction of innovation, and lots of failed policies that make everything more expensive, especially in the energy sector, with Germany turning off working nuclear power plants and running head, like seeing eyes into an energy crisis. I mean, this is so ideological driven. They basically sacrifice the well-being of the country for their ideologies. Now, we don't have that in some of the Eastern or Central European countries. So I think Hungary, although the previous Orban government also had its problems, but I think they did reasonably well. Then Poland, I think, is doing reasonably well. It is being estimated that Poland is about to overtake the United Kingdom in living standards. And we can already see now that the net migration has stopped. So actually more Polish people are coming back to the country. They are leaving the UK again because they're saying by now the living standards in Poland have become better, plus there's less crime, and the trend is much better. So I think there's some Eastern European countries that are doing reasonably well. Also Estonia, I think. And it's interesting when you look at these countries, you hardly find any leftists in parliament. Like basically it's center parties, right-wing parties, and not socialist ideas that are ruining those countries. Yeah.
I see a trend, and maybe I don't see a lot of countries, but for example, in Austria, I see the FPÖ getting stronger, even though they are not in the government, and they are way more critical about the European Union, and they address a lot of those points that you also brought with immigration and the woke ideology. Then there's the AfD in Germany, and there's probably a bunch of other parties in the other European countries, and I see them getting stronger. Them like getting a really good stand within the country. I mean, in terms of Austria here, I know it obviously the best. I know that the FPÖ got, I think, like 30-something% was the strongest party. Now they are a way the stronger party when you just go from the polls. And so is there like a small awakening that like people see the problems more, and those parties that look critical at the immigration laws that have been done the last 10-20 years, look critical at what the European Union does, are kind of getting more popular? And I think Hungary was interesting because even though Viktor Orban now lost the election, but the party that won the election is not from an ideology, not like left or socialist or anything like that. They're way more in line with the FPÖ and the AfD and the Viktor Orban party than with like a democratic or like socialist party. So I don't know. I just see a small trend, but that might just be hopeful straws I'm getting at.
Yeah, I just looked up the FPÖ in the polls, and they're at 38% right now, which is very, very high, definitely. So I think if they can keep that up, the next Austrian elections will almost have to take a right-wing turn. And it does seem, especially in South America, which has been socialist for decades, most countries, there's a trend away from socialism. And I think with Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, with Javier Milei in Argentina, we have two national leaders that are really also fighting corruption and that are implementing good policies in general, and showing how things could work when politicians finally do politics right, or at least I'm not saying I agree with everything, but they do show that it works. I mean, how Javier Milei brought down poverty rate and relaxed the situation with the rent prices and so on by following classical libertarian principles, which have almost nowhere been tried in the world, except maybe post-war Germany, that followed quite a libertarian ideology for some time, and then had a really massive decades of massive economic growth. So, but most countries have just tried socialism again and again, and they failed. And true libertarianism has almost never been tried. Like Javier Milei is one of the first. So, seeing quite quick positive results, I think, of policies being done right does help. Which does not mean that, for example, the AfD will have the right economic policies. I'm not sure about that. Like, they could also be a bit collectivist in their thinking. I mean, they also have different branches within themselves. The libertarian branch within the AfD is sort of with Joanna Cotard, and they lost some great people. So I'm not sure how good AfD would be for Germany, but yeah. Right wing doesn't automatically mean good, does not automatically mean less statism, but usually it's better than socialist. Yeah.
If you live in Europe like I do and want to buy Bitcoin the right way, check out Relai. Relai is a Bitcoin-only platform with no distractions, no shitcoins, just a BTC. It's also the easiest way I've found to do what actually works, buying Bitcoin on a consistent basis. Relai is also self-custodial. They never have the keys to your Bitcoin. No freezing of your assets, no counterparty risk, no rug pulling whatsoever. I have been a long-term fan of Relai, not only because it's incredible, easy to use and very beginner friendly, but also because it just works. If you want to get started with Relai today, click the link down in the pinned comment or in the description. And once you have downloaded the app, type in Robin in the referral code section of the app to save 10% on fees. So set up your DCA Bitcoin plan today with the Relai app and get cheaper Bitcoin if you use code Robin. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Finally, we have BTC Prague back in 2026. And this year, I'm not only speaking on a panel, but I'm actually going to present an interesting new angle, a perspective, a Bitcoin thesis at BTC Prague this year for the first time ever. I've never done that on any other conference, so this will be a fun one. If you listen to this show on a regular basis, I would love to meet you in Prague this year. It's very high signal, no noise, and Prague is just a freaking amazing city with awesome drinks and a lot of good food. Use code Robin to get 10% off, and if you buy with Bitcoin, you get an additional 5% off your ticket price. I'll see you there in Prague. Make sure to come say hi. This is the biggest problem that I see. Like, if there's a government in control and that government sits at the power, they have an incentive to make the state bigger. The first reason why that I see is if they take things away. So like if they, for example, take away subsidies from people, it makes in the short run things more expensive for people. There was in Austria something with the train ticket that the government subsidized. They took it away. Now the train tickets are more expensive. People that travel a lot with trains are now pissed. Like, obviously, not everyone. Some people obviously understand that it's a good thing that the state is making things that the state might get smaller. And then it's always like, okay, yeah, like you wanna decrease taxes, but where's the money coming from? And so there's almost no incentive to take away subsidies, make unpopular decisions, and then decrease the taxes and then slowly decrease the state. There's a lot of incentive to do the exact opposite, to give people exactly what they want and give everyone money so everyone is happy and so you get reelected.
Yeah, at some point it almost becomes a point of no return. Let's say Germany, where I said the state quotas like more than 55%. I mean, if you have 55% of the people depending on the state, then these people will vote for a strong state and for the kind of taxes that keeps up their employment and the payments to them. So once you've crossed that 50% threshold, it might be very difficult to come back from that, because you've trained more than half of your population to be dependent on the state. And then it's very difficult to go in a healthy direction, unless it becomes so bad, like in Argentina, that after 70 years of plus minus socialism, people say, well, we have to try something radical new, and it cannot be worse than what we experienced the past 70 years. And that's when things then can start to become better, but it probably has to be at a pretty bad place before such a radical change of mind happens. And then you need the right people to actually educate the people about basic economic stuff and how the state works and how inefficient the state is. I mean, that's what I try to tell people. I tell them I've been now in parliament in the Canton Bern for more than 9 years. The longer I am in parliament, the more convinced I am about the state being quite inefficient. And I openly tell people, I also tell people, we are not competent as politicians. We need to decide on so many issues, on maybe 500 policy issues every year. It's impossible that we are competent on all of them. So I'm quite upfront with people, my voters, about that. And I tell them that's why don't give too much responsibility to the state. It's just not efficient. Yeah.
It's such an interesting one. And is every democracy then like, it's super hard for me to imagine that a democracy that once starts to elect people and elected people see if they just give people what they think they want and give them subsidies to make it bigger, they can actually get reelected. And it's got almost a self-fulfilling prophecy where a democracy has to at some point run into a problem where it gets too big. Or is that, or it doesn't, or does that not happen? Like, is there a way that a democracy can work without the elected party making sure they get re-elected, making sure the state gets bigger because they are at the head of the state?
Yes, I think it is possible. The example of Switzerland shows that Switzerland is quite different from the surrounding countries. We are also a bit on a similar trend with the state getting stronger, especially also the welfare state, also getting less efficient and so on, but we are nowhere near the levels of the countries surrounding us. And I think one aspect is the direct democracy we have. So, for example, a very, very recent example, the Parliament of Canton Bern, which I'm a part of, recently just decided to renovate an art museum, and that the government, or that the state, that the canton should pay the biggest share of the costs for the renovation. and the amount the canton was supposed to or was planned to pay, it went up from 40 million Swiss francs to 81 million Swiss francs. So a clear majority in parliament said, no, we want that renovation and extension of the art museum in Bern, although it is suddenly costing twice as much as originally planned. But then a group of us in the parliament said, no, it's just getting out of hand, and we want to make a referendum against that financial decision. So now in June, the people of Canton Bern will decide whether they want to spend the 81 million Swiss francs of government money for the renovation of that art museum. And it could be that the people say no, that they say this is just over dimensionized and too expensive, and it's not right that so much taxpayer money should be spent for that. If they want to extend that art museum, let them find private sponsors more for that. So we'll see how the people decide, but I think there's a good chance that people decide, no, that's too expensive. So there's this correcting factor that the people have a say in how have a better say in how their taxpayers' money is spent in Switzerland, and politicians are they are not too free floating. Like once they're elected, they cannot just do what they want because they're still bound by these regular direct democratic decisions, by the threat of the referendum, which a minority in parliament can use. Like if they feel the majority of parliament just made a decision that is not going well with the majority of the population, you can make a referendum and then see who's right. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So like there's the direct. So is direct democracy then kind of the key to all of that? Like having a better culture of people constantly being involved in policy decisions and not just like I vote once in 6 years and just leave it at that.
It's not a solution for everything. I think it just leads to less bad outcomes, or it slows down certain negative developments. For example, also with the COVID-19 law, Switzerland was the only country which let its citizens decide on the COVID policies by that the COVID-19 law had to be put to the vote 3 times because there was a referendum against the law when it first was passed by parliament, and then it was amended twice by parliament. It was made even more stricter, and then there was another referendum. So because the parliament knew they had to get a majority for the COVID-19 law to be able to implement these policies, they had less strict policies than in the surrounding country. So, for example, shortly before the second vote on that law, the government said, well, those who have recovered from COVID-19, their certificate is now valid for 12 months instead of 3 months. So that's how they compromised and sort of made it. And generally, the restrictions were much less than in the countries surrounding us. And I think one aspect was the direct democracy. I personally believe that all of the COVID measures were bogus and were idiotic and were extremely harmful, and that almost none of them should have been implemented. So direct democracy did not protect us from all of them, but it made them less bad than abroad.
That's interesting because with that direct democracy, they not only have to justify it, because like politicians usually just have to say, we implemented this and that's is why, and they kind of have to justify it so they get reelected next time. But they actually have to educate, convince, however you want to call it, to actually vote in that direction. And if you have to vote for something and not just hear it in the news, like it's a very different thing if you just sit in front of the news and you hear how someone justifies a policy decision, or you hear something where you know you can vote on that, then you actually spend more time, if it's 5 minutes, an hour, or 10 hours more, to really hear what should I vote on that. That's an interesting perspective, because this really forces people more to build an opinion, because a lot of people probably in Austria, which is directly next to Switzerland, probably never really formed an opinion on the COVID-19 policies, because they just heard it, they took it, they did what the government said, and that's it. If the government was like, okay, before we implement any of that, let's have a vote, then people would have been forced to form an opinion, because it's different to hear something or to actually put a vote somewhere. It's a subtle difference, but I think it's a very important one.
It gives the people more ownership of political processes and also results, which I think is a good thing. So if things go bad, people cannot just say, well, it's the politicians' fault. Yes, of course, they carry a great load of responsibility. But if you vote in direct policy-related issues, if you vote for something that turns out to be completely stupid, then you share the blame in a way. You cannot just say, well, the corrupt politicians did that. No, if a decision is then supported by a majority of the population, then that majority of the population in a way also carries the responsibility for that decision.
It then also brings politicians and governments closer to the people, because they share responsibility amongst each other. That's a good argument, especially for politicians. Like, you actually can get closer to the people and not be like, oh yeah, I'm king of my country, I do whatever I want, and after 6 years I tell you some things so you can re-elect me.
Yeah, absolutely. So politicians are very close to the people in Switzerland. They are very approachable. Even our government, the 7 members of the government, most of the time don't even have professional security. You could meet them at the train station, or meet them, like, you could see them and maybe even shake their hands, say hello. The people in the national parliament, it would be no difficulty at all for you as a citizen to meet them. Like, you'd go to one of the events where they're speaking about what they're doing in parliament, and maybe 20 people are listening, maybe 40 people. But like, if you say you want to approach a member of the national parliament, you can meet almost anyone if you sort of know how to go about it as a normal citizen. So, and also in the Swiss political culture, it does not go well at all if you as a politician think you're something better and you feel you should have certain privileges or whatever. Like, our cultural mindset is also to keep the politicians very down to earth, and every member of parliament, or being a member of parliament, is a part-time job. So you're still in your regular work, like you have your regular job where you came from, and you still do that on the side. So, and by that, you're still rooted to the reality of the economy and of everyday life. So the politicians are much less detached from people's lives in Switzerland.
Is there a connection between Switzerland being the last state or the last nation to go off the gold standard, and Switzerland having one of the best, maybe the best democracy system? Like, is there a system? Is there a connection between those two things, or is this more coincidental?
I could imagine that there's a connection, maybe a second or third order effect, not a very obvious one, but we've had the Swiss franc had the least money supply growth. So we had the least inflation, in the past 40, 50 years, partially also because it was coupled to the gold standard for a while longer than the US dollar, at least partially. Also, partly because we are used to a bit harder money than the rest of the world. Our central bank is also, I think, going about things more responsibly. Our politicians have a higher degree of responsibility in relationship to fiscal policy. Like we have what we call the debt brake in Switzerland, so that it's very hard for politicians to actually go into debt, that they need like a supermajority for that. And actually, we've quite reduced our debt load in the past 30 years as a country. COVID was a big exception, so that threw us back a couple of years. But in general, the debt to GDP ratio has been going down in Switzerland, while in many other countries it has increased a lot. So I would say many aspects are more healthy in Switzerland, and I could imagine that having been on the gold standard for such a long time, having a sort of awareness of we need to deal in a way financially in a responsible way. I think we have a legacy here that is still helping us today. Yes.
It's also interesting. Switzerland is then a real world example of a connection between healthier money brings on a healthier society and healthier politics and all the rest of it, kind of.
Yeah, it could be. Like, I'm sure, I mean, society, politics, how our nation works. I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, the heritage of Switzerland, why things function the way they do. There are many different factors to that. I mean, the whole West was influenced for centuries by the Bible, for example, by the Christian faith. Other cultures did not have that heritage or have had it for a few years or a few decades, maybe in some African countries, and there are different factors. But sound money, I would say, is a factor that most people are not aware of. That is probably quite influential, and I do believe that effects are there, but it would be very difficult to distinguish how big that effect is compared to other effects.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. Yeah, there's a lot of inputs, and you can't be sure how influential each input is for the output of society. There are a lot of Bitcoiners out there that have given up on the political system, that have given up on democracy, that have given up on voting. What's the best reason for those Bitcoiners that have given up in their country on voting. They probably don't come from Switzerland, but from their people that come from other countries to still go to vote, to still be politically active and kind of have an opposition to the view of, if I vote, I just support the state.
So I believe in almost every country there are truly honest politicians who are independent, who are not bought off by big money interests. You might need to really find them and look for them. Many people who say they don't vote because the whole system is corrupt, they are too lazy, from my point of view, to find those politicians that have not been corrupted, that have a track record of not being corrupted. For example, Thomas Massie from Kentucky, a congressman in the United States, has a great track record of being libertarian, of fighting for principles, of not being influenced by big money. And he's been viciously attacked by big organizations, by Donald Trump himself, for not letting the Epstein files slide. So he totally went against Trump with regard to the Epstein files. And actually, I think Thomas Massie is probably the central figure in why part of the files had to be released. So whenever you see someone like that, you have to get behind him. Like if you see someone taking so much fire for not falling in line with his party or whatever, the pressure that is on him, you can be sure like this guy's the real deal. And I believe there are at least some politicians, or at least some candidates in most democracies that are still like just responsible to their own conscience, that try to achieve the best for the country. So just don't be too lazy. Try to find them, then vote for them, even if they have no chance at all, but encourage them by voting for them. It's better than not to vote at all, I would say.
There was I forgot her name. I think, Stephanie Crispa. She was a member of the parliament in Austria with the NEOS party, the small liberal party in Austria. And NEOS is now in the government, and they voted for some mass surveillance law. I'm not sure about the details, but I really respected her after that, because she went out of the party. So she did not vote for that. There was 2 members of the parliament of that political party that did not vote in the party line, which I absolutely loved. And 2 out of like 15, it's a big thing. It's not like 100 people, it's like 15 people. And one of them, like her, is not stood up and said, for the thing that I've been voted in, I cannot represent anymore. And she, unfortunately, she did not take the stand of being an individual, independent in the parliament. I think I would have liked that more, because then she has a voice in the parliament. She just went out and gave the space to someone else. But you find those people in every single country that stand up for for what they think is right. And maybe you don't even agree with like some of the things that they're doing, but at least they are not just falling in line with the party, or not just falling in line where big money is.
Yeah, I mean, there are some countries that are so corrupt that if you have these kind of politicians, they are usually dead. Like Mexico is such an example, that those politicians that are honest, they unfortunately end up being very dead. Maybe not all, but way too many. So that's very sad. I mean, once a country is so corrupt, it's really difficult. But if the country is not at that place yet, then you should try and fight for it not to get there. Yeah.
At some point, maybe it's time to leave a country. Also, I don't know. It's like
yes. If things are getting too bad, you can vote with your feet, definitely. Yeah.
Is Bitcoin moving the needle on how decentralized and how individualized a nation is, how direct democracy works and all of that? Is Bitcoin at all moving the needle long term, you think?
Not yet, but it definitely has the potential to. So we shouldn't forget that sooner or later, like the plebs will get political offices. Not just politicians who say, "Oh, I'm for Bitcoin," but who don't understand Bitcoin. But at some point, hardcore Bitcoiners will get elected to political offices, and I think many have the chance because of the freedom ingrained in the Bitcoin ideology. I think many of them have the potential to be great politicians. And then there are some politicians that are becoming Bitcoiners, like Robert F. Kennedy. And I found it extremely interesting to listen to his speech at Bitcoin 2023 and Bitcoin 2024 conference. Because in 2023, he was a very new Bitcoiner and he had some good things to say. And in 2024, I realized he's really deep in, like, this guy has conviction. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, you'll have Bitcoiners that will have more and more influence as number goes up, as the number of Bitcoiners increases. So, and then eventually, I think Bitcoin will have that effect of also leading to more decentralized, more freedom-oriented structures in a state, because those adhering to the libertarian or Bitcoin ideology will grow in influence in society.
Yeah, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I cannot even pronounce his name. Probably would have had my vote. Like, I heard his speech also, and I also noticed the difference. It was fascinating how much he learned, and he hit every single point you as a Bitcoiner kind of want to hear, and not just the obvious ones. And so I think he studied Bitcoin and the Bitcoin policies a lot, what Bitcoin needs, and it's always hard to say how much of a real Bitcoin someone is, but I'm fairly certain that he is one of the true Bitcoiners. But yeah, I know our time is limited today, so thank you already for being on the podcast. We have, as you know, a end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you actually a difficult one. I had my hard time answering that. The question is, of all the things you believe in today, which one is the most likely to be untrue?
There are a few, let's say, things happening in the world where I think in scenarios, people would maybe call them conspiracy theories. I don't like the term. I can't, like, someone adhering to a so-called conspiracy theory might feel they have all the answers to, or maybe easy answers to difficult questions. So I try to not have easy answers, but to think in a nuanced way. Maybe I'm too naive still in a few areas. Maybe I'm too critical. Maybe hard to come up with a concrete example. I would need to think a little bit about that. I mean, it would be some area where I am sort of still in the process of figuring something out. Which could that be? Probably vaccines in general, not only the COVID-19 vaccines, but I don't have kids yet, but I'm getting married in a few days and I hope to have a family soon. So I know I'll have to look at the vaccine question. And right now I'm very unsure there. Like, are all vaccines bad? Are some of them good? Like, which ones have a good benefit to risk ratio? That's probably one of the things I'm most uncertain about right now. So where I might say in the future, oh, maybe I changed my opinion. Yeah.
Congratulations, man! Really, really cool on your engagement and vetting. Thank you so much, Samuel, for being on the podcast and spending some time with us today. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
X, Facebook, Noster, Telegram. You'll find me easily. I'm very accessible. But if I don't write back, then just try again. Sometimes I am very busy, and sometimes I do get a lot of messages. So I try to keep up, but don't always succeed.
And those inboxes of social medias are usually like very weird. Like emails are like more is more structured. The DMs of especially Twitter is messy sometimes. Yeah, thank you so much, Samuel, for being on the podcast. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.